Hello, and welcome once again to the next ReeVlog. That light is not going to work well for this recording. Let me fix that. Curtain, yeah. I think I can work with this. Let's just do some movement. Oh yeah, wheels. It's good, right? I think I've mentioned previously I've got an AC unit. Phone is currently resting atop of that, and it's on wheels, so that works well. I need to push a stick really quick so it doesn't dig into my back. Oh, it seems to be caught on something. That's fine. I'll move it there. Then it might slap me, but I should be okay otherwise. So, what is this ReeVlog in particular going to be all about? Freedom. No, it's not. Well, it is, but it isn't. So, I recently had the genius idea of, on my wall planner, just adding a couple things, such as the remaining dates that I have with no scheduled activities. Those dates are ones like this one, where I do have things that I have to do. Predominantly things like housework, catching up on my personal emails, which still, to this day, includes things like taxes for the business that I no longer operate, because the government's crap. But, you see, having done so, has made me realise that for the rest of the year, I have at most 19 of these days remaining. Can't remember whether that includes today or not, but I have for the rest of the year, which is just under half the year. We're in July, and we're in the first half of July, so it's just a bit under half a year. I have 19 days, with which I can do what I like, except, here's the fun part, some of those days I have included where I am likely to be travelling in the evening time, going to events that are corresponding the following day. Corresponding the following day? That is not correct, that are occurring the following day. Travel there the night before, potentially, or at least get ready before travelling in the morning. And some of those days are travelling back. Those such days, largely holiday days that I've booked off of work. But those weekends are fully occupied, because the events are those weekends. So those days barely count, because it is all about preparing for the upcoming event or recovering from said event, most likely. Then some of the days, I'll admit, the things that are booked in aren't huge, so I will still have a large amount of the day. Like last weekend of this month, I've booked one of those 2 days in to record a phone call with a friend to do a podcast. That is booked in, and the reason that that takes that day away from being free is I have a scheduled appointment, which I don't know whether, well, partially it's so that I don't double book, so I don't say, oh yeah, I can do something else that day, because I can't, because I have that. But also, with the chronic fatigue, sometimes without heavily caffeinating, I've got maybe an hour, maybe 2 of like functional brain and like motion potentially before the chronic pain and brain fog really do just stop me from being able to do anything. And I don't want to overly caffeinate. The weekends, the days where I don't have to do 9 hours and a bit of being up and about doing things, those are the days that these are the days, I suppose I should say, where I'm going to be trying to not like be caffeine reliant, because I can afford, as long as I get the housework done and basic hygiene stuff, etc., to just not do anything. That means I won't make any progress towards any of my goals, but it does mean that my health won't deteriorate. My heart's not going to explode, things like that, which are pretty good. Which leads me into the other restriction on my free days, my potentially 19 remaining free days. The other restriction would be I can't do anything that will cause a flare-up. Unless there's 2 free days in a row, and on the first day I can do something that will cause a small flare-up, such as jump squats to failure. I could do that. 1 set of jump squats to failure. That's all. But I could do that, say, on a weekend with nothing booked in. I could do that Saturday, or even Friday evening. But the next day, I am not doing anything, most likely. It's not guaranteed to cause a flare-up, but doing intense exercise like that probably will. Doing prolonged, lower intensity exercise, such as going on a 10-kilometer walk, likely to also have similar effects. I remember paintballing for someone's stag do earlier this year. I was done in the next day. I was like absolutely ruined. Barely remembered it the day after. Just because it was a few hours of constantly doing things and some degree of exercise included. Nah, that was it. That was kaput. So, that is another thing that sort of cramps the freedom, so to speak. Because obviously I do want to do a lot of physical things. You know, my goal to be a great martial artist and martial arts instructor requires me to maintain a minimum standard physical condition to be able to do the things that I need to do for the martial arts. I need to increase my hip mobility, as I always do and likely always will. Maybe eventually I will obtain the level of hip mobility that I require, and then it will be about maintenance. And I'll need to train to maintain, because it is not where my body naturally wants to sit. So I would need to effectively force it to, which takes time, which takes effort, which takes energy. Yeah. But if we keep trundling on in this mental thought train of mine, I have those potentially 19 days with a minimum amount of exercise each weekend that I want to do. I've actually done this weekend's minimum amount, and I will be doing more because I'm training Kung Fu with my instructor tomorrow. I also am going to try and go for a run tomorrow. The plan will be get up crazy early, go for a run, come back, have a nap, then go to my instructors, because if I go for a run before going to my instructors, like beep boop, I'm not going to be able to last long enough at my instructors to be able to do what I need to do to get the training in. Now, I don't expect it to be a particularly long session tomorrow, because in effect it's a recap of the last session a couple weeks ago, where we did 3 sets of techniques. One of them is 1 technique, one of them is 2 techniques, and one of them is 3 techniques. So it's 6 techniques in total. That's it. That is the whole recap. Now, no doubt we'll have to do a warm-up, which is a small workout. That's just how my instructor is. No doubt we'll go through some other nonsense beforehand just to fatigue me, to make it harder, because, again, that's just how my instructor is, you know? And then those 6 techniques, go through those, make improvements, so show him what I'm practicing when I get the opportunity to practice, like I did this morning. Because that's another thing for my weekends, is get Kung Fu practice in as and when I can. But yes, show him that, tweak those movements, make notes on the tweaking of those movements, and actually practice against another person, because they are sweeps. Almost like throws, but not quite, because they don't like fly around. It is just they are standing and then they are on the floor. As such, they are hard to practice properly on your own. You kind of need a person to sweep, and I don't have one just laying around. I am going to potentially, if I have the energy, as today's not terrible. I've had some caffeine, I've had one dubby, whoop whoop. If I had the time to do YouTubing more, I would do my affiliate link in the descripty-boo, but I do not, so I haven't figured out how to do that yet. And also, the affiliate link isn't for me, it's for that podcast I mentioned I'm recording later this month, so eyes peeled, ears peeled. I don't know, keep your eyes and ears out for the podcast. It won't be coming out anytime soon, but eventually, yeah, that's what we're after, that podcast. Anyway, enough of that. I've had one dubby pre-workout, which it is designed primarily for gaming, like focus. But when you combine that with a stim-free pre-workout for exercise, which is more about blood flow and stuff like that, you get a pretty good sort of combination, because you get the focus and that bit of caffeine to keep you awake, and then you get the blood flow and other benefits from the other one. You don't actually need both. The W one you can just use for exercise, straight up. But I find that mixing the two together really helps a lot more. I've only had the W so far. I've not had the other one yet today, and I've almost completed my weekendly exercises, because I think I said earlier in this video that I have done them, but I realised I still have more push-ups to do. Not a lot, but I do have more to do. I need to get those done. But this is a tangent that is not required. I may be going to my mother's later today, if the energy infusing me remains. Because I go most weekends, almost definitely won't be going tomorrow after Kung Fu, because I want to get the run in first. And then I'm going to be dead to the world, I imagine. But you see, I get this thing that I do. I have my old training equipment at my mother's, including my grappling dummy. The grappling dummy isn't amazing for sweeps and throws and stuff, because it can't stand on its own. If you just let go, it'll onto the floor. It won't be in the same position necessarily as I train against at Kung Fu, which is a different position to a person would actually be in if I ever needed to use this technique anyway. But it is better than nothing, and I technically have space for it here, but I don't then have space to use it here comfortably at the moment. Something I'm working on slowly. Well, sneaky side project, not that I have enough of those. On my weekendly to-do list I have a side project Java. I haven't done that in a long time, and I don't think I'm going to do that for a little while, just because of how few free days I have. 19 for the rest of the year. I don't think I'm going to be able to do minimum quota exercise, Kung Fu practice, all of the housework that needs doing, anything related to the business, and like finishing that along, because things get in touch with me, and they're like, you've got to do this because your business bank account. I'm like, well, I need to close that business bank account. How do I do that? Well, I don't have the time and energy to do that during the week, so that's a job for the weekend. Learning Japanese. I've not done much of it. I do my 1 minute a day every day, but that's another thing that if I can and do have time for, weekend I can do more. Project Java is a back burner. which is really sad because I like it, but I've got to be realistic about what I can achieve. My wellbeing calls, my group discussion with the chronic fatigue specialists, etc., all revolve around prioritizing, and unfortunately I cannot prioritize Java because I have to prioritize other things. End goal, be a martial arts instructor, full-time, ideally somewhere semi-remote, self-sufficient. But if I can get to the point where I can instruct martial arts, then I can work on the ideally section. I've got a long way to go yet. So that has to be priority number one, outside of the things that will stop my fatigue from spiraling. So housework and hygiene are number one. Then Kung Fu, which includes the minimum quota exercise. That is actually the main thing that I do. Technique practice, which I prefer, I'm doing less of at the moment because I need to make sure my body can do the techniques. And there's also an endurance aspect to Kung Fu, always, but it is increasingly prevalent the higher up you get in the belt system. To start with, it is, can you get into the stance and stay in the stance for a few seconds, maybe even a minute? The answer is usually no, and then you can. You practice it and you can. You lose that practice, you can't anymore. I'll admit there are some stances. A minute is asking quite a lot. The classic one is the horse stance that is all over the internet, as well as many other places. But yeah, so that's what you start with, and then you move on to striking, for example. Can you do continuous punching for a minute? And the answer is yes, but your continuous punching, can you maintain speed and power and good technique? The answer is probably no. And a minute, you can get a lot of punches in a minute, because you can punch like really slow or whatever, or you can punch quickly, but your technique will fail. Also, it's really hard to punch properly whilst you're sat down. Maybe I can do this as like an oblique workout. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I've got my resistance bands here, so I could bang, bang. We'll find out. Who knows? Who cares? Someone. But yeah. So, oh, we got a little thing. Oh, that's a neat reminder. Today is 4 years since I started my business, and roughly, like 4 years to the day, and roughly 6 months since I stopped it. Woo! Anyway, I've got more to say about Kung Fu. Yeah, so punching. You can start punching like very rapidly, doing multiple punches per second. It's much easier to do quickly when you're not also speaking, but this is what we call chain punching. Wow, Kung Fu. Pow, pow, pow. Bang. But you've got to make sure to open your hand in between every punch. Not poke. You've got to make a fist on the way out, clench on impact, other hand opens on the way back because you relax it. You drop form as you go because you get tired. You stop being able to consciously think about it. You've got to focus on breathing, etc. These are all endurance related things. But as you progress up the belt, it's less of a, here is one thing, can you endure doing it? And more, here's 30 things, do them all back to back. Because there's the forms, or the kata, as they would be in karate. Yeah, that's a thing that we do. We have forms. The first one I think is like 34 moves, then 54, and then, I don't know, my current one's 61, I think, off the top of my head. Ironically, the hardest one's 23. and I've got to make my own. That has to be at least 30. Having to do all of those back to back is hard enough, but when it's all of those back to back after a warm-up, which is a small workout in its own right, followed by stances where you are pretty much just being evaluated on an isometric hold, followed by other techniques which require you to be nimble and graceful. Things that don't come well to me anyway, let alone when my legs are vibrating on their own and I have no control over them. That's an endurance test. And my instructor has said the black belt exam is about, like, it's multiple hours long. I can't remember exactly how they said it, but it is really, really long. And it is like, do an hour workout as the warm-up. 1 hour full workout session. Then do all the forms back to back. And currently, I have quite a few forms. I'm not going to name them all because secrets. Screw it, I'll name them. Got leg sack, got fist form, got empty hand club form, got 9-step hand defense. Not a form, but it probably counts for that purpose. We've got young dragon. Well, we've got first half young dragon, we've got long dragon, then we have the full form of young dragon, and then I know that there is a crane form. I think there's a tiger form, there's a sword form, guan form, club form, which means there's going to be like 12 minimum back to back. Each one of them is minimum 23 moves. I can't think there's going to be any that have less than that. That's a lot of moves. And yes, in stances you get effectively evaluated on an isometric hold. You have to do those same holds throughout those forms. You might have to do those forms multiple times. I would say up to 3 each. 1 in your own time. So you go through the moves, making it flowy and cool looking. So you effectively go through, like, here's a technique, as opposed to count, where it is the same technique, but it is broken down into segments. So it is 1, 2, 3 moves. So to count, it could be 1. You do the first one, and then if they don't say 2 for a minute, you stay in whatever position you're in for 1 until they say 2, and then you do the next one, and you hold that until they say 3, and you do the next one. Then we also have it under tension, where you have to flex every single muscle you possibly can whilst doing the techniques, which obviously is a workout in and of itself. It's effectively, I can't remember the name, but yeah, it's really hard and it takes a long time. Easy to get lightheaded, but you can get asked to do every form in every way. Some of them you can't really do under tension properly because it's lots of standing on one leg doing a kick type deal, or lots of stepping, which you can't really flex everything whilst doing that, and you can't do that super slowly because you're meant to do it super slowly because you're tensing so hard. You're fighting against yourself to move. But yeah, so as you progress up the belts, once you become instructor grade onwards, it's mean, effectively. So I need to make sure I'm capable of doing that. That's what I was getting at, I believe. I've got completely off topic. I've just noticed that the video is like 23 minutes long, so I'm going to go and continue with my day, upload this, put the phone on charge, and see about potentially going to me mother's, as well as finishing up those push-ups that I mentioned earlier beforehand. I should also have breakfast at some point, because so far I haven't, but I did have a large tea, so all works out in the end. Regardless, I will catch you cats on the flip-flop, and goodbye.